The HRBC MeetUP series continues again for the second show tonight with a look at House District 91, an area on the eastern part of the peninsula, covering parts of Hampton. The Libertarian candidate for that seat will join us, Mr. Charles West, and he is kind enough to sit down and discuss the campaign and important topics to the HRBC. The Hampton Roads Black Caucus has already endorsed A.C. Cordoza, the Republican for that seat, and as of yet, Mr. AC hasn't finalized an appointment with the meetups, but we would still like to have him on. Nonetheless, in the spirit of good politics, we want to extend a hello to Charles West and bring him on the screen right now. So, Mr. West, good evening and welcome to the HRBC Meetup series. Are you doing well tonight?
Yeah, I am, comrade. It's great to be here. It's an honor to come on anytime and hang out with you guys. Long hard day at work. It's good to finish it up and wind up here, discussing important topics to our community.
Exactly. Now, speaking of hard day at work, I want to give you an opportunity to give a little bit of background about yourself, what you do, what you think, politics-wise, and so just give the viewers, the HRBC viewers, all about you.
Definitely. Well, as you guys know, my name's Charles West. I've lived in the area all my life. I went to school at Tab High School, went and got my associate's degree at Thomas Nelson Community College right here in Hampton. I work in construction, and I believe that neither of the big parties has our interests in mind. They work to push agendas, and once they get into office, don't show any real evidence of wanting to connect with their voters. It's terrible to me that only one day a year here in Virginia is lobby day, because every day should be lobby day, because the delegates represent the people.
All right. Also, could you give us a little bit about yourself in the community and what you do employment-wise and so on and so forth?
Yeah, most certainly. I've been involved in activist movements in the area since 2015, a couple years after I got out of high school. I spent a long time recently working, but the past few years and seeing the way things have worked out and how our community has been treated by the quote ruling class, it's pushed me to want to get back out there and get back as part of the fight. I've supported independent candidates ever since I was old enough to recognize that I cared. And once upon a time, I considered myself somebody that thought, government could be used to help folks out that were disadvantaged. But really, I realized that that's only one piece of it, that the whole other piece is that we get our liberties infringed upon every single day in small, tiny ways. And it carries over back from my young days, only speaking up when I seen horrific things happen that grabbed everybody's attention. I've realized more and more over the years that it's not just those big times, that people need to stand up for the little things.
And we'll touch on some of those little things, which, depending on how you look at it, could actually be some pretty big things as we go out through this show here. But I want to start off with about the race itself and why you would be interested in becoming a Virginia delegate, and more specifically, I guess, what you understand the role of a delegate to be.
Okay. The why that I'm interested in running to represent our community is I was on the way to work from the last presidential election early in the morning, and I realized I'm tired. I'm tired of seeing my friends and neighbors forced to pick between the least worst choice. And then every time, almost invariably, it turns out to be just another agenda pushing politician, somebody that doesn't respond to your messages, doesn't respond to your answers. And it's time for a real representative who works for a living, who looks after kids that are in our school system and whose lives actually depend on the choices of the legislature. It's time for us to get rid of corrupt, insulated, out of touch politicians. And to my understanding, a delegate's job is to represent. It's a representative of the people. So much now you see people use stock terms and commonly used phrases about leadership and about coming forth with great ideas. But really, this was told to me by a mentor of mine. It has nothing to do with your own personal great ideas. In the position of representation, what it depends on is your constituency. It depends on the issues that are going on in our community and what the people here care about, what the parents and the workers and the business owners, what they're worried about, not what the corporate interests are worried about or what the news tells us we should be worried about or what we personally feel we should be worried about. It's the most customer service type oriented position in government. It's one of the only elected positions that's truly accountable to the people regularly.
All right. Now, I want to touch a little bit on the concept of inclusion with state government and a culture of it, if you will. Are there strategies that you would like to use to include, say, more diversity initiatives which promote opportunities for all residents in employment and business and services?
Yeah, most certainly. Not only do we want to promote inclusion and diversity within the government itself in terms of things like how we appoint judges. It's only been since I've been running for this office that I've learned that judges are elected by the representatives, not necessarily the people, but the way that judges are picked to be put on the list for who the delegates vote for is real backdoor and real shadowy. And that needs to be different. There needs to be a more open and more transparent process for things like that and how we get appointed officials in the government. And then outside of that, we need to keep on working on promoting the growth of diversity in terms of small business and in terms of access to higher education. There's no reason in this day and age. And I come from a scenario where I didn't really have a lot of resources, and I was able to go to school because there's always a way, and we should make it so that there's always a way. There shouldn't be any reason that a college degree, which holds almost the same equivalency as a high school diploma once did, should be out of reach for somebody because of terms like socioeconomic status. If higher education is something you really truly want or willing to work for, there shouldn't be any barriers there. So whether it's the state government or whether it's private, we should always be promoting inclusion and diversity, because when you get the same type of people in all the positions, you get the same type of ideas from all the positions.
All right, all right. Now we're on to number 3 here. Public officials should reconsider their role and their ethical responsibility in advocating for social justice. So, what would be your role that you would like to play in supporting racial and social justice?
In terms of racial and social justice, a lot of the wellspring from which injustice comes here in the Commonwealth of Virginia is built into the way, it's baked in, if you will, to the way that the government relates to the people that live here. In every way, from things like policing, which is one of the more direct ways that the government interacts with people. We could pick bones all night about different ways we could improve that to make it more equitable, to make it to where money and privilege doesn't buy your way out of trouble, because it shouldn't. You know, the lady with the scales that we use to represent justice, she has a blindfold on for a reason, because it shouldn't matter who you are, it matters what you do. And then you get deeper into things, and you get to things like city council meetings, school board meetings, where you get somebody that comes with a problem and the reaction is to have them ejected rather than get down to a frank discussion about what the person came with, back to how the government's supposed to serve the people. There's so much of an interest in protecting the city or the state from liability and bad press that you end up getting regular people hurt. And there's no excuse for that. It doesn't matter if they're black, brown, blue, yellow, rich, poor. none of that should matter because everybody's supposed to be equal under the law. And until that's the truth, we need to fight.
Now, we're going to switch over to business here a little bit. And if you could talk to us about how important Black owned business is to you, and how would you support local Black owned business and economic development as a Virginia delegate?
Definitely. Remember a few minutes ago, I said that I'd lived here my entire life. We have a real diverse population here in Hampton Roads. Black owned business is supremely important to me. All small business is important to me because if you don't have small veteran and minority owned businesses as the backbone of our local economy, then what fills the gap? Back to big, nameless, faceless, unaccountable organizations that at the end of the day would sell you or me out for a little bit extra percentage of profits. And so getting back to, like I said, Black owned business and all small business in our community really is supremely important to me. And if I was to be elected delegate, I would make moves to reduce the regulatory barriers and the rules, or some of the rules that get put into place that act as chopping blocks for small starting businesses. They make it so difficult to go through things such as licensure, to go through things such as compliance. And in a lot of scenarios, these compliance and licensure regulations aren't even written by people in the industry, or people certified in healthcare, or even people certified in things like environmental science. Usually it's legislators. Usually it's written in a partisan fashion, and usually it hurts small business owners. Aside from that, we want to work to cut some taxes. We want to get rid of the income tax here in Virginia so that both workers and business owners will be able to keep more of their money in their pocket. Less of your money gets diverted off into the black where the state mismanages it, then small business itself grows faster, grows better.
I think your volume dropped. It didn't mute, but it dropped there for a second.
Sorry about that. Just a moment.
Now that's a little louder. Good.
Ooh. Can you hear me now?
Yes, sir. Before I go on to a couple of questions regarding education, and I do have two wrapped up and ready to go for education, I might be ready to go to some viewer questions if you don't mind.
Please, while I go ahead and straighten out this audio issue.
All right, let's go with the first one from Miss Andrea Dixon over in Norfolk. Why do you think diversity in thought is important in the community and in elected officials?
Because, as I stated earlier, if you get the same people with the same privileges and the same status benefits in these different positions, that's all you ever get is the same old ideas. And not all of these old tried but true ideas are wrong, but when people go out of their way to enforce a system where their friends and their other favored people are the ones that receive the benefits instead of being worked for everybody, when the ideas come from a multiplicity of places, then you generally regress to what is more of a true average. Mm-hmm. When you don't have extremities fighting to end up getting ineffective policy, you get real voices involved, and that's where the magic happens.
All right. Let's head on over to some of our education questions here. This is about relationships with education, and how will you help build relationships within the state government and between schools and the wider community?
It all comes back to two words: transparency and accountability. I said earlier on tonight that every day in Virginia should be lobby day. There should be nothing stopping citizens from going and speaking to their legislators. There should be no barriers to citizens voicing their complaints to organizations like school boards and city councils. And especially when it comes into things like schools, a certain autonomy should be afforded to local school boards, but even further than that, autonomy should be granted to parents and families. It's hard to entrust our kids to organizations when they have evidence of mismanagement over time. And legislators and superintendents and school board officials should work tightly and closely to ensure that where the state board of education and where state law comes into play, those things are followed, not, like I said, to avoid liability for the city or state, but to work for the better of the children and work for the better of the families involved.
All right. Now, that is a good way to help improve the relationships, but the result of education sometimes comes up with some disparate outcomes between various communities across our state. So, how would you like to help close the disparate gaps in education among those communities?
Most certainly. When you look at Virginia's education funding over the years, which have turned into decades now, we've poured money into our educational system. And the answer when schools are lagging is, oh, they need more money in the school. They need more money in the school. But for all this money that's been put into local school divisions from state funds, teachers are still buying materials themselves. Teachers still aren't getting paid what they're supposed to. And performance has still come up as lackluster. And there's some problems you can't throw money at to fix. Sometimes you have to get the big government out of the way. If you would entertain me, envision a world where all those property taxes parents pay, instead of the state divvying up where those funds go and the city using it to pour into school systems which are mismanaged. Envision if families received a check. And it could vary. It could vary depending on things like special need, age, so on and so forth, how many kids in the family. And you could either give that check right back, tear it up, whatever, send your kids to the public school, or take that same check and put it into offset private school tuition. Use it for homeschool materials. Use it for religious school tuition, what have you. That puts a little bit of capitalism into the system. And the teachers, as well as the students, will go to where their education is managed better. A lot of the times when politicians get involved and they want to force the schools to improve and they don't want to throw money at the schools, generally all it does is result in hurting the kids. And if we took and put the families back in charge of where their children receive their education, the teachers would follow the better management, the students would follow the better management, and the public schools will be put into a position where they need to improve or lose students. And we can do so without hurting the kids that go to public school, because if the public schools don't turn their acts around, of course, the parents can always send those kids somewhere else. Mm-hmm. That right there puts it doesn't necessarily take responsibility for school performance out of the state's hands, because the state is still, of course, responsible for the performance of the public schools. But it doesn't entrap children and families into poorly managed public institutions.
All right. Now, before I go on to my next question here, simply because I will acknowledge that you are a libertarian, and I want to bring positively that idea of that to education itself, because we know when we think of education, we first think of it being a government-run enterprise. And you just interjected a little bit of the premise and perhaps promise of school choice. Um, Beyond the idea of choosing to get out of it, could you also think of good ideas that could help improve the government part, the public aspect of education?
Most certainly I do. I think that going hand in hand with putting attendance levels and performance with each other, we can incentivize the schools to perform well, not just for their own sake, but for the sake of the kids in the cities. We can make them better. We can make them better by ensuring that their management is not just efficient, but connected. That's the thing. If school administrations are receptive to families' concerns and willing to work with families, then the public schools will get better, and they don't have to lose students to do it. And the students that are in public schooling don't have to suffer for the worst.
Yeah, this is more of a speculation on my part. As I'm in Virginia Beach, I'm near the Green Run area. Green Run Collegiate is one of those charter schools that is in Virginia Beach. I think when we've had on candidates like Glenn Youngkin on, that they would talk about how there's only so few of them already in Virginia Beach, and well, that one in Virginia Beach, but so few in the state of Virginia. And then I've always thought, yes, we could definitely point to them and say that they are actually having pretty good outcomes. But is it so good to leave them by themselves to do that? Or is it much like people who get into coaching? If they can study the methods of already successful coaches, could we then bring that back to public education and just make it so they're also being able to create as many great students as the charter school do? I think that might in some way go with our question here that Miss Andrea had as well. What are some of the benefits of public schools, and how would you assess them specifically? I guess that would be more my idea, which is like just study what makes charter schools and private schools tick, and then bring it back to public schools if that's a thing that could work, because it's still just teaching.
Yep, most definitely. There shouldn't be anything stopping innovation in public schools. Right back hand in hand with using competition as a form of incentive to improve. If that's what's required to improve, why should the state be putting up barriers to that? I'm 100% with you there. Because we get right back to where exactly the issues and mismanagement lie. You know, if the school boards can study what goes on in successful institutions that their students are going to, why shouldn't they copy those same methods in an effort to compete?
Because in the end, when we just want to make sure that kids are getting the best education possible, so you want to get as many of the kids learning as much greatness as they can. I think you're right. We could definitely bring everything together in good ways like that. Now,
Most certainly. I mean, that's 100% the goal. We have to move away from the currently accepted method of teaching kids just enough to mark a checkbox, just enough that they're minimally competent. Because that's how we get to where we are now, where people mindlessly swallow information without verifying it, because we have a culture of not bright critical learning and critical thinking. We have a culture of information regurgitation, where you take what you hear, regardless of where you heard it from, and parrot it back as if that's the reality. And we need to get away from that culture. You know, a real famous comedian once said, you know, the issue with a lot of these schools is they don't want competent, critically thinking, informed citizens. They want people just bright enough to work the machines, but not quite bright enough to ask any questions. And we have to break that if we are to get past it. If we're to improve in an economic sense, if we're to improve in a political sense, if we are to maintain our cohesion as a people and as a culture, then we have to get towards educating children to the fullest and not just to the minimum competency.
Good points. Good points. Now, I don't want to ask any redundant questions because I know you've touched on the idea of trust and good relationships between the citizenry and government, but I do want to get back, I guess, to how the citizens might have a distrust of state government itself. And if there are any improvement ideas on that that you might have on that front, and how you might, as a delegate, want to literally improve that.
Yes, I do. Because that's, as I've done this and learned a little bit more and met a bunch of these political figures, I've learned more and more. It frustrates me. It frustrates me to no end that your average schmaverage person, average regular voter like myself or you, well, I'm running for political office, but myself from last year, you only ever see a candidate when it's election time. It's so hard to get in contact and not only voice your concerns, but actually see said concerns acted on. And there's no reason that elected officials like delegates and state senators should not feel completely accountable to their constituents. When it comes to ways we can improve things so that voters feel more like they can trust their state government, not only should every day be lobby day, but I'd like to see it made a law that if the General Assembly is in session during working hours, 9 to 5, what have you, legislators should be at the General Assembly, not out fundraising, not out doing luncheons or meetings or what have you. If they're not sitting in that chamber taking a vote, they should be in their office, ready to answer a knock at the door or a phone call from a constituent. Anything less is unacceptable. Further than that, we should put in term limits so you don't get these career people who get up in a position because they know a guy who knows a guy, or because they have moneyed connections, or because they've sold themselves out to interests, that hold these same seats for decades and decades and decades until they're well known for holding that one position. That's not real representation or accountability. And I feel like by instituting term limits and making it easier for voters to get in contact with their representatives, that will do some small part to make the delegates more accountable to the people. But even further than that, we need to overhaul how elections are funded. There's Conrad's roofing business. If you owned a business of some kind, maybe not roofing, maybe you own a paper company, whatever. If Conrad wants to donate all the money in his pocket to his favorite politician, there's nothing that says he should not be able to. I agree with people when they say that there's a First Amendment component to election contributions. But the moment Conrad's roofing or Conrad's paper sticks their money into our politics, it takes away the accountability to voters and constituents and makes delegates and representatives accountable to shareholders and companies. And companies don't vote.
Mhm.
Companies and shareholders, they make decisions in the best interests of their companies and of their shareholders. They don't vote. They don't have favorite politicians. When they donate X amount of money to a campaign, more often than not, it implies a quid pro quo. And that's not good. People by default, as long as corporations are buying and selling our politicians, and as long as they aren't answerable to the people who vote them in and out, they can't be trusted. I agree with people that don't trust the state government. But if we fight hard enough, and if we make ourselves heard, and if we make ourselves visible, and if we throw these old insulated politicians out of office, we can make the government one that we can trust again, one that's more for the people and less for the interests.
It's definitely what we should be fighting for. I would agree with you on that. And as we get ready to wrap up here, I'm down to like my last prepared question. And I want to piece it together in just acknowledging that I myself am more of one of those progressive Democrats. You might think like a Bernie type member of the Virginia Beach Democratic Committee. I'm also a member here at the HRBC running the meetups, and we just like to engage with the community in such a way that the community can get more informed. You're here as a libertarian candidate for HD 91, and yes, the organization has endorsed a Republican. So all of us together, we're just still trying to help the communities in the best way that we can. And I'm glad that you're here tonight to share with us the depth of your mind on this and how you want to be a part of that process, especially in the state house. So in lieu of that, the most important question of the night will come down to this. Why should we vote for you?
You guys, and by you guys, I don't mean the Hampton Roads Black Caucus, and I don't mean the Virginia Beach Democratic Party, and I don't mean progressives on John Rawl. I mean you guys, as in the other people here in Hampton Roads who ride on the same streets, who walk on buildings and things that I help build, people that I see every day and that I care about, should vote for me, because we don't have to take what they give us. We don't have to vote against the other guy, regardless of the fact that we can't stand the guy we're voting for. We should be able to have somebody that doesn't look at a voter as, oh, somebody I got to deal with. We need to have somebody that's excited to deal with voters, that's excited to deal with the community, that's excited to do things to help better all of our situations, not just my friends, not just the people in my party, not just the people that I work for, but everybody. Ways that we have less crying moms getting ejected from meetings, and that we have less people getting beaten on for violating laws like cursing on the boardwalk. Stuff like that's inexcusable. And when we find ourselves raging, there isn't an answer from these people. We've tried one way, we've tried another way. This time we should do something different. And maybe, just maybe, we'll get a politician who isn't a politician.
It's a good way to sum it up there at the end. I do greatly appreciate you joining the HRBC Meetup series to just talk about politics, your campaign, why you want to run, why we should vote for you. I definitely want to thank you for doing that. I also want to give you this opportunity to just tell us how us, the viewers, can follow you more. Any social media links, any things we should go to, between now and election day, just to make sure we're staying in touch.
Definitely. Before I get to the rundown of how to get in contact with me, I just want to make sure that I express my thanks. I'm so grateful that you and the rest of the HRBC have decided to bring me up here and let me get right down to earth in a way we can all understand. And I also want to extend thanks to the HRBC for the invitation to their breakfast event. It was lovely. It was great interacting with everybody there, and I was hoping I would get to see you there, and I was sad you weren't.
Well,
And to answer your question, I'm all over the internet. I'm on Facebook at West 4 Delegate 2021. I'm on Twitter at West 4 Delegate 21. Our website is west2021.org. If you've got any questions, comments, concerns, you want to help out, you want to donate to the cause, you just want to look at a pretty picture of the city of Pocosin, west2021.org. Super easy to remember, super simple. And if you leave a message on there, you're not going to get some intern. You're not going to get some kid they found at the party meeting. You're going to get me directly, and I'll email you back. And if you want to come see us, we'll be at Smoke Barbecue in Newport News with the Peninsula Libertarians at lunchtime on Saturday. I'll be out in Buckrow Beach Saturday morning, and I'll be coming out to Virginia Beach to the, so far as I know, first Cannabis Festival in Virginia Beach. We'll be out there in the afternoon. And I look forward to anybody that decides to want to come up, talk to us, whatever. I greatly anticipate it. We're still looking for volunteers. If you've got the day or can get some time free on Tuesday, November 2nd, come on out, help us out, talk to other people in the community, maybe make a friend. And that's all I've got currently. Make sure you get out and vote. And thanks again, Conrad.
Very welcome. Before you head away, and just the Cannabis Fest you just mentioned, what was the date on that? I don't think I caught the date on that. Was that this Saturday?
What is Saturday?
That some other? Well, 15th is tomorrow, so 16th, right?
16th. Yep.
So it is this Saturday?
Yep, this Saturday the 16th at the Virginia Beach Convention Center.
I do hope that other people watching would head on out to that. I unfortunately can't go because I will be at Norfolk State for their homecoming game, working the event staff. Behold the green and gold. So I do hope that you enjoy yourself on this Saturday. And again, thank you for coming by today.
Awesome. Well, I wish you and the team the best of luck on Saturday as well. And I can't wait to run into you again on the campaign trail.
Sir, hope you have a great night.
Y'all have a great evening. Thank you.
Thank you. This has been another one of the HRBC meetups. This time we were interviewing Charles West, running for the HD 91 seat for Virginia Delegate. Make sure you also tune in to future HRBC meetups as I organize them, as I am the stream team leader. So make sure you get all the as many politicians as you can in the Hampton Roads area to encourage them to come on the show. I'll book a show for them and ask them some of the great hard-hitting questions that the Hampton Roads Black Caucus cares about. Hope you enjoyed tonight's show, and we will catch you the next time.